Good afternoon, and welcome everybody to Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. I am your host, Shayna Terrell, educator activist dedicated to the lifelong struggle of freedom and liberation for her people. I appreciate everybody coming out to watch again this week. Shout out to all my co-conspirators, and shout out to all our new folks who are in the space to support the work. And I want to give a huge shout out and a major thank you to anybody who has been supporting our We Need Black Teachers campaign. To find out more about our campaign, please visit www.weneedblackteachers.org. And as always, want to give a major shout out to Citizens Ed and the Center for Black Educator Development for creating a platform where we can talk to real people in the real struggle, doing the real work. So today we'll be talking to another powerful voice in building the Black educator movement. And he is a colleague of mine. He's one of the newest members of the center. So Mal Davis is an educator, podcaster, and social justice advocate that believes in the power of people. He has spent most of his adult life working with communities of color to identify issues that cause harm, and then working with schools and nonprofits to create solutions. Over the past 5 years, he's worked in talent management with the intentions of identifying and hiring diverse teachers, support staff, and school leaders in New York City, Camden, and Philadelphia. He has 2 podcasts currently, the Third Lap podcast and Monumentals, featuring Tim and Mal. So please welcome, and I said Mal, he's going to stab me. It's like Mal, because my man's name is Malcolm. But please welcome to the show, Mal. What's up?
Chilling. What's going on with you? I appreciate you, man. You know, we talked like less than a week ago, about the podcast, and then being on, man. I'm excited. I'm ready to rock and roll. So thank you.
No, without a doubt, I'm so excited. Like, just your energy and how you came across, and then you saying like, "Oh, I do a podcast." I'm like, "Oh, this brother's energy is going to be dope." Like, and again, you're doing fantastic work. So dope energy, fantastic work. I think that's an excellent combination. And you know
Yeah,
what we
a
try
little
to do
something.
here. What you say, boo?
I said a little something, man. You know, still a lot more work to be done for sure, but you know, headed in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, and then just with this podcast, we try to do a lot to expose folks to the current work that people are doing out in the
Yeah,
field, but also people can come here and learn some tangible things that they can take away with them.
right.
And I felt like, again, the work that you're doing, your energy, your voice is dope. People can learn a lot from you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, excited. Let's jump in.
So one of the first things I always talk to my guests about, because I think it's important for people to share their educational journey. So
Yeah.
what inspires you to be an educator? Like, how did you get into education?
Oh man, that's a whole podcast in and of itself. So short story, you know, for me, I think that it boils down to the fact that I was the good kid, quote unquote, and the bad kid, quote unquote, in the same person, right? And so, you know, you from kindergarten through about 7th grade, 8th grade, I was like a B student, high level, you know, accomplishing kid. Got into high school, was diagnosed with depression, really fell off the mat, became like the kid that nobody checked on, nobody was checking for. You know, shout outs to Mr. Gaines, who was my history teacher in high school, who was really the only teacher that kind of even cared about my outcomes. And so, you know, in my own journey, I got a chance to see what it's like to be that kid with all the accolades that all the teachers point at and say, hey, what a great student. And then also that kid that people just brush to the side. And so for me, I knew what that second part was like, right? And so when I got into the work, initially, when I first graduated college, I was working in a residential treatment facility in New Jersey, and I was meeting a bunch of really great kids, but they already had drug charges. They already had gun charges. They was in the streets heavy, and they only 14, 15 years old. And so I realized right around that point that I needed to get way ahead of the judicial system, the school to prison pipeline. Like as I was learning more about it, I was like, okay, I need to get into a classroom. And so that's what initially got me into the classroom. And then once I got into schools and was working in education, I became a huge advocate for those kids that were marginalized, that people forgot about, that folks weren't checking for, you know, those kids that fall into the cracks, or that, you know, everybody's like, this is a behavioral issue. You know, I had got dubbed the bad kid whisperer at one point in time. And, you know, I took that on as a challenge because I don't believe that there is such a thing as a bad kid. There are kids that are misunderstood. There are kids that are misled. There are kids that need additional help, support, and guidance. But there are no bad children. They're children. They're still learning, developing, and growing. And so, that's really what got me into education. What keeps me in education is the fact that we just need more educators of color. We need more Black men in this work. And as a person that did teach as a Black man in the South Bronx, shout outs to the South Bronx.
Shout out.
You already know, yeah. And so, as a Black male educator, I know the importance of recruiting more Black men into this work. And, there are so many statistics that show just having one Black male teacher in the lives of any student, especially our Black and brown students, is transformational. And so that's what got me in it. That's what keeps me in it. That's what brought me to the center. And so, yeah, man, I'm just excited to just keep doing the work.
Yeah, and what's amazing to hear about your story is that your own experience is what
Yeah,
really pushed you into education. And like so many of our young Black men, just to hear, it's heart wrenching to hear, like, when you were going through your own mental health struggles, that you were like literally cast aside.
100%. Even my coaches gave up on me because, I wasn't performing at the same level athletically. And so they wasn't checking for me. And so in the end of the day, man, it was like, y'all really just had my parents and Mr. Gaines. And like, that was kind of it. And so I don't want kids to have those experiences. I want you to feel like you have a ton of advocates in the building. You have a ton of people in this safe space. And, until school becomes a safe space for our students, for our teachers, for our families and our communities, we'll continue to do harm to Black and brown people. And that's not what I'm here for, right? Like, that's not what the center's here for. That's not what you're here for. And so, yeah, we all in this work together to transform, especially urban education here in Philly, but around the country, into a much safer space for our kids and our communities.
Yes. And I think that what you said is so key in terms of like people who are coming in spaces shouldn't be coming to do harm to children. And I think that
Yeah,
sometimes what's to highlight from your stories, I think that sometimes people think that doing harm to children is coming to actually do some physical harm, but
right.
neglect is
Yeah,
major.
yeah,
Neglect is major. And what you are sharing through your stories, like you were neglected by folks who
100%.
you expected to be in your corner. And you never want kids to feel like that. So you made it your mission to
Yeah.
make sure kids don't feel like that with kids in your presence, and to find more people like you, who can wrap their arms around children and who can wrap their arms around the community, to spread hope.
1,000%. And I'm 36, right? Like, these things happened 15, 20, 25 years ago. I still remember it like it was yesterday. And so, yeah, you got to unpack that as trauma now as an adult, right? You got to go to therapy and talk about grade school stuff. Nah, that's not fair, right? We need to do better. We need to do more as the adults in these children's lives. So like you said, so that they don't feel neglect. They might feel that at home. They certainly feel it in community and in our society as a whole.
Yes.
So they come into our classrooms and feel neglect. They come into our school buildings and feel neglect. So where are our children safe? And so,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I advocate for. That's why I go so hard, is because I want our kids to be safe everywhere they go, but especially when they walk into a building that's supposed to serve them and they don't feel that way,
Yep.
then, we got to get out the way or we got to do better.
Definitely. And what's so pivotal again about what you're sharing is you weren't the kid who was cutting class, getting bad grades, and like that. That's not how you started.
Nah,
You
that's
know,
how
I'm
I ended though. It took me 5 years to graduate high school. When I did graduate, I finished with a 1.8 GPA. I almost dropped out of high school. Shout outs to my mom for going so hard and staying on my neck and not allowing that to happen. Shout outs to my dad too for the same thing. But if I would have had my way, I would have dropped out because I was ready to quit. I had to get homeschooled because I refused to walk into the school building. And so, through homeschooling and I had one class a week in order to finish, right? But I was ready to quit. I was ready to fold, give up, walk away from it. And, I'm eternally grateful that I didn't. But on the same note, all of those experiences definitely dictate who I am today and why I am where I am and why I do the work that I do every single day.
Yes, and you are such a reflection or a mirror of so many of our young men, that
Absolutely.
go through that struggle. Like, I'm racking my brain right now and like remembering being in education and seeing young men who are like thriving, and
Yeah.
just at some point, straight decline. Like, you
Yeah.
start seeing those absences become
Yeah.
more frequent than they do sporadic, and you're trying to find out what's going on. But
Right.
sometimes you just don't know, like, they don't know within themselves what's happening,
Yeah.
what's going on.
Absolutely.
but having somebody to continue to believe. So shout out to Mr. Gaines. Okay.
Yo, shout outs, Mr. Gaines, man. Yo, I appreciate you. And it's funny because Mr. Gaines is Jean Gaines, who is my homegirl. That's my sister. That's her dad. And so when I got to his history class in 10th grade, he knew me from a little homie, right? And so when I finally got to him, he saw the change in me, but the rest of the teachers didn't have that context. And so for
Mm,
them, I was just a kid that sporadically showed up to class, wasn't really doing what he was supposed to. I had gotten introduced to marijuana at that point. I saw girls and I was girl crazy at that point. And so
mm.
it was everything but school. But when Mr. Gaines caught me, he was like, nah, I'm not going to let you go. So I think I did the best in his class, and the rest of them classes I could care less about. And it also helped that history is something I've always been passionate about. Black history is something I've always had passion for. And so he built that passion and that intellectual curiosity in me. But realistically, he's the only teacher I remember from high school, right? Like people be like, yo, Mal, you remember so-and-so and so-and-so? I don't remember none of them, dog. I don't remember not one of those people. I remember Mr. Gaines. That's it. The rest of them teachers, don't even remember them. Don't remember the principals. I remember the officer Mike, the security guard, because he might catch me tripping and talk to me a little bit. I barely remember my coaches, but I remember Mr. Gaines, and I will forever be grateful to him for taking me to the side on numerous occasions and pouring life into me in a situation where nobody else did it.
And again, that's and the fact that he was that impactful. You like, I literally don't remember anybody
Nah,
besides Mr.
for what?
Gaines. Shout
Why
out.
am I remembering people that didn't invest in me and didn't care
Invest
about me?
towards you, had no impact.
Nah, none at all.
Didn't care about basically what happens to you. I guess
Not at
you know,
all.
not gonna be another dropout kind of stuff.
And to add the context, so I went to high school in South Orange and Maplewood. I went to Columbia High School. So if people know Jersey, that's the suburbs of Essex County, right? And so
Mhm.
that was the piece too, is that I'm going to a school that's predominantly white. And so they don't care about the black kids for real, for real. I played
Mhm.
football, played baseball. I was athletically inclined. And so when I first got there, that's how people knew me. But after a while, I stopped doing those things. And so, it's easy to fall to the wayside. It's easy to, hey man, we got to make sure these white kids get placed in college. So these black kids, if they ain't giving the effort, and it's a school with like 1,600 people, so it's
Mm.
real easy to fall to the wayside and just not get back to shore.
And I talk about this sometimes too, about how kids in black children and predominantly the white spaces sometimes are the ones who like need us the most.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely, a
because
thousand percent.
poor black neighborhoods, poor black people are just completely forgotten about.
Of course,
But at the end of it, like there is still a sense of we have each other, y'all. We got a connection. We got to work together to organize and rebuild.
yeah,
For our young black children who are out in predominantly white spaces, who do they have to connect with? Who they
right,
even there are like they don't even see windows and mirrors in their peers,
yep,
right? Like
yep,
talking about teacher level, but they don't even see it in their peers. And then
right,
beyond not seeing it in their peers, where's their connection to themselves, to their history, to
yeah,
understand what their place is in the world,
yep,
in the community? So again, I feel for you, but I think your experience mirrors so many of our young men and our young men that are athletes, and
yeah,
exceptional athletes, what they
of
have to
course.
be subjected to.
Of course. And coaches don't pour into these kids the way they're supposed to. They see us as cogs in the wheel. They see us as an asset, not as human beings. And so, when you play in a sport and your coach isn't teaching you how to become a man, he's not a
Mhm.
real coach. That's just a person out there calling plays. A coach is a person that's going to stand as a mentor, as a role model, as somebody that again pours into you to help you become the best person that you can be. And a lot of these coaches, that's not really, I guess, how they see themselves. And then certainly when you get to the collegiate level, it's all a business. So
Yep.
they're not really taking the time necessary to ensure the successful outcomes and college graduations of their black students, and black student athletes, I should say. So that's a whole other again podcast
I was
too.
gonna say, so that's a separate podcast. So shout
Yeah,
out to all
word.
the coaches out there doing a thing.
Yeah,
But
man, I
you were
love the
saying
coaches though.
business at the collegiate level. It's a
Yeah,
business in high school. So
absolutely,
it turns
absolutely.
into that. But shout out to all the coaches out there, including
Yeah.
my husband out here standing
Hey,
up, teaching
yes
young men
sir.
to be young men, and all the men
Yes,
who poured into my son. So
yes.
shout out to
Shout
all
outs
the
to all of
coaches
them, 100%.
who are doing their thing. But I
Yep.
agree with you 100%. When people, especially with coaches, they see kids as a product and not a person.
Yeah,
um, that delivers a difference in how they treat young men.
for sure.
But tell us, what are you doing here at the center? Okay, you are a
Hey,
Stonely Fellow. What is that?
yeah. So Stonely Emerging Leader Fellow, the Stonely Foundation is located here in Philadelphia, and they're doing a lot of really great work as a nonprofit, really investing in the outcomes of people of color, and it really goes across the spectrum. So I am an emerging leader. So I am a part of a cohort of, I want to say about 6 to 7 people that are doing work in the juvenile justice system, doing work around homelessness for teens and housing, in education, all across the board, right? And so, for me, the next 2 years, I'm serving in an education policy fellowship position with the Center for Black Educator Development to really continue to build on the work that I've been doing around diversity recruitment, getting more Black educators, as it's the Black Educator Pipeline, right? So this is the podcast we're on. So getting more Black educators into the pipeline, but on the back end, also really thinking about what are we doing to keep the educators we already have? Because we know that Black educators, in comparison to their white colleagues, are more likely to get burned out and leave the work. And so, if we're doing a lot of really great work on the front end, getting high school kids really excited about the work, and then getting them into college and going through these 4-year, 5-year programs, then they're getting into the work and leaving in 2 years. That's a shallow investment. And so, for me, it's really about digging into what's the stuff that's already happening. The PEDC, which is a consortium here in Pennsylvania, is doing a lot of great work. The center's doing a lot of great work. There are already people doing so much here in the state. And so I really am trying to get a hold of what's already happening, really start codifying some of those best practices, and then bring that to the school district of Philadelphia, to some of the charter schools here in the city, and to school districts across the state to say, hey, here's how you identify strong educators. Here are the best practices that some of the best schools in the city and state are already doing. But ultimately, here's how you keep folks. And so, there's already toolkits available, and there's already information readily available for folks. I'm just trying to take some of those best practices, raise them up higher, and then provide those in a way that it's really easy for folks to decipher, and not get lost in the minutia of the numbers and information, because it's also a lot, right? Like, where do you start? And if you don't know where to start, then you won't finish.
Facts. Definitely facts. And so far, I mean, like you said, you're 36, so you have been
Yeah,
in education for some time.
a
So
little
to
bit of time,
it's a little,
just a
but
little bit.
but to be right at this path of being an emerging Stonely Fellow,
Yeah,
how has your work in education helped you to arrive on this particular path, right? Because I think
yeah,
like we've all had different paths to get into the world of education. Like I had no intentions of being in education. I've always
nope.
had intentions of working with kids,
Yeah,
right? Like I've always had a spirit for working with kids. I always felt like it was my mission and my duty to help the youth, right? Like
yeah,
to make sure that the ones who are voiceless have a voice. Like that was always
yeah,
my drive and my passion. But there was like so many different roles that led me to you're actually going to be an educator and work in a school
yeah.
building. So how did you arrive at this path on being an emergent fellow and thinking about policy?
Yeah, so I share that pathway. I was rapping. So I had no interest in teaching. I was trying to spit bars and go platinum. And then I realized I wasn't going platinum. The bars, they was tough, but people wasn't really digging it commercially. So I was like, hey, what can I do with my life? Uh, so, I
My
had been a I had been a para, I had worked in that residential treatment facility. And I really started to get God brought a vision to me, to keep it real with you, that I needed to do more for my people. And, as it's always said within the center, and a lot of Black educators say it, one of the most revolutionary things you can do is educate. And so as that came to fruition for me, I come from a long line of educators. I have friends and family that are educators, and so I was like, okay, teaching might be the thing for me. And so I was, through citizen schools, I was a 1-year teaching fellow in the South Bronx. When I looked to continue teaching in New York City, the state of New York told me they would not take my credits from college so that I can continue to teach. And so at that point, I was dejected. I was hurt. I was unsure of my pathway. I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I was just told I couldn't teach. So I applied to PA, I applied to Cali, I applied to Florida, I applied to all these states. They all said the same thing. You have to go and get a new 4-year degree if you want to teach. And so at that point, I was like, wow, okay. So I ran an after school program. Through that after school program, I got involved and invested in talent management, got into talent management for several years. But I never, much like my experience in school, I never forgot that moment when I was told I could no longer teach. right? That teaching was not for me, despite me having the passion for it, having the outcomes for it. For the year that I did it, my students moved up grade levels and they did well on their state test scores. Couldn't crack that code. And so, I thought for a second, I was like, well, how many people are experiencing this exact same thing? And then I get into the work and I realize, man, so many Black educators are faced with this exact same hurdle. And so, I was getting to a point at KIP where I really enjoyed the work that I was doing. I love the people that I work with, but I knew that I had to do more in regards to impact, in regards to my legacy. And so
Mhm.
I just happened to be on LinkedIn one day and I see Sharif El-Mekki post about an education policy fellowship through the center. And I jumped on it. Like I emailed Victoria and we got on the phone like a couple days later. And, I applied for the position. And honestly, like I didn't think I was going to get it. I knew that, the center and Sharif has such a wide ranging impact. There are going to be so many people that apply for this role. But I know if you're not in the game, you can't win. So I put my name in the ring and I was like, listen, I'm going to do the interview process. I was sweating bullets during the interviews. And, I was super nervous because I felt like this was the next level of my career to take what I've done to the next point, right? To like evolve and level up. It's funny though, because I told myself I would never get into education policy. I felt that I will always be in the field. I will always be close to the work. The kids are what keeps me in the work. And I had gotten, and no offense to anybody, I love all the people that I've worked with for the most part, but working with adults had really kind of burned me out because I was in it for the kids. And the more that I rose up the ladder corporately in regards to talent, the further away I got from the kids. And so I was like, man, ed policy is going to have me at the top, right? Like I'm going to be so far away from the kids. But I also realized through policy, that's how you affect change across the board. And so, when I saw this opportunity, apply for it, was sweating bullets, was praying like I had never prayed before. And Sharif and Victoria extended me this opportunity. It was no looking back. And, this was a great opportunity for me to also work for a Black organization. I had never had that opportunity, never had that experience. And so that was a big piece of it as well. But yeah, all of my experiences led to this point, and led for me to be able to really advocate well for Black educators and for the need for more Black educators, because I've been in their position as a teacher. I've recruited Black educators into this work. I've worked hard on the back end around trying to figure out how do we keep more of them in this work. I was a person that couldn't get certified, so I've been in that position as well, right? And so, I completely comprehend all of the different nuances and levels to this of why people leave. But ultimately, I've been able to be a part of success stories of transitioning folks from other walks of life into this, and, young educators getting into this and getting them excited about this work. And so I was like, all right, cool, policy, man, let's get it done. And so for the next 2 years, that's what I'm dedicating my time and energy to. And then when these 2 years are up, wherever I'm called next is where I'll serve. But for right now, I know where I know that I am where I'm supposed to be. And so excited for this opportunity.
Yo, I want to shut you out though for not letting that barrier of becoming certified kind of get in your way and kick you out of the learner education,
It was
because
close.
well, your story, right, is like many in terms of all of these hurdles and hoops that people have
Yeah.
to jump through to become educators. And it also leads to what we talk about a lot on this in this space too, about how a certification doesn't necessarily judge if somebody is a phenomenal teacher.
Not at
So
all.
you already had the scores or the data to prove that you could affect change in young people. And we
Yeah.
have people who are certified out the wazoo, and
Can't teach.
can't teach and can't
Can't
connect
teach
with a kid,
at
can't
all.
move a kid from A to Z the
Yep.
first. So that's one of the things we talk about in this space. And then again, you diving into policy where it can hopefully really affect some change, because there are some powerful conversations happening around the validity of certification, and is it really a good measure on whether somebody can teach or
And
not?
they need to happen. And I had a conversation, shout outs to Otis Hackney out here in Philadelphia. And so we had an impromptu sort of one-on-one conversation. And he was saying, for certain subject areas, absolutely. Like, for math, if you can't pass this math test, should you be teaching math? But, we can go to the SATs, the ACTs, all types of standardized tests with ELA. That's super subjective, right? Like,
Mhm.
did you learn about those white authors in school? how rigorous was your education in your urban school where you were able to capture these vocabulary words. And so, some of this is super subjective. Some of it is objective. I think that we have to take it sort of by like a step-by-step lens and perspective, because you don't want to do away with the testing completely.
Correct.
You have to have some layer of
Some
like,
measure.
hey, exactly. We have to have some measure, but are the measures that we have correct? And if we know that they're not, then what are we actively doing to overhaul them to be able to make this a more equitable process for people? Because if we're saying we want more Black and brown educators in this work, but then we find that this is one of the biggest hurdles that prevents them from getting in here, then we want the work to stay predominantly Caucasian. And if that's what we're doing, name it, right? But like, let's not pretend.
Ain't nobody gonna name that. Who
So
naming that?
then, then let's stop fronting and let's do some work around fixing this thing and making it better, right? Because there are so many opportunities for us to make this work more equitable, but we continue to see the work's not being done, right? And so you don't have to say it; your actions speak louder than your words. We all know that.
Facts. And again, your experience, like so many people, get stuck in the support teacher role.
Yeah,
People get
paras.
stuck
Yep.
as paras,
Yep.
and they, because of for whatever reasons. Because even with yours, it's just such a complicated problem in terms of, it's not necessarily the question of whether you can pass the certification, but somebody telling you, hey, you got to go take a whole nother set of this. Where's that money coming from?
Yo, they
You
told me to go back to CUNY for 4 years, get a new degree, and then come back and do it again. And I was like, who's paying for
who's
that?
paying for that? Who's paying for that? Where's that
And I was
money coming from?
29, so I wasn't going to be 33 graduating with a bachelor's. Like, I'm not doing that. And age is, it is what it is. But yeah, to that, my story was definitely
Lisa,
complex.
it's time. Time. You're at a different
Exactly.
point in
Exactly.
time in your life to now. I got to
Exactly.
go back to dedicate myself to a full 4 years of
Right.
college when I'm already in the field working.
Making money. And
And I
I'm
have
trying to
to,
get
right? Like, again,
married. Like,
right.
I can't. Come on. What are we
Gotta
talking about?
support a family.
Come on, man.
And
It
you're not
wasn't
telling
going
me
to
to go
happen.
back to get my master's. You're telling me to go
Nah,
back to get a degree that I already have, an
already
undergraduate
have.
degree.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So when
Exactly.
we talk about time and money, like that
Yeah.
alone is super discouraging for folks. But we have so many people who are caught in that extremely complicated cycle, trying to
Yep.
jump through hoops when all they want to do is teach
Just
kids.
teach and make impact in communities where they're from. Think about how many of our parents come right from that community where they live, right? They live and teach in the same exact community, building great relationships, and so they become parent coordinators and all of these things, but educators. And so, we're leveraging the Black and brown people that we have in our building to, think about how many of your custodial staff know all the parents, right? But if they ever wanted to transition into teaching, it would be the hardest transition of their life. But
No
we
cap.
leverage them to talk to our parents. When the parent come in irate, yo, go get Mr. Smith, go get Miss Jones. She know the parent, right? And so, what are we doing again to really be able to? And some of this work is now happening in PA. Shouts out to people advocating for it. There's a bill on the table right now that's trying to make more of these things equitable, making teaching a CTE pathway, right? And like, so there's a ton of stuff happening. But if that bill falls short, then what, right? And so, like, I think that that's sort of what some of us are bracing ourselves for is, okay, we're putting all our eggs into this basket, rightfully so. But if this isn't the basket, then what do we transition to next? And I think that like people have been a part of that what next process for a really long time.
Yes.
At what point do you get tired of the what next game? We know what needs to be done, right?
Well,
So like,
you
let's do it.
can't be tired, right? The fight is
Nah,
a
never
lifelong,
tired.
the fight is a
Forever.
lifelong struggle.
Yep.
And it's a multi-layer process, to
Yeah.
have people working in policy, to have people working on the ground. So
Yep.
saying that to say, like, there is no policy right now that deems education as a CTE program. That
Yep.
don't stop the work that we're doing with some of the programs at the center to make sure
Yep.
that we have in-school educated pathways for children. You can
Yep.
call it CTE if you want, or you cannot. But at the end
Right.
of the day, we still gonna make sure we exposing these children to
Yep.
these pathways in education, because that's what's
Absolutely.
going to be necessary to move the next generation of young people into the field of teaching. Same thing with folks who are building programs for parents to go ahead and transition into teaching. There's no formal policy around it. There should be. There should be all
Yeah.
types of incentives and money in order to help people transition from one stage to the next. Because again, I can just imagine I'm a parent and thinking about my salary. I know that I have the unteachable things that I call. I can build relationships with
Yeah.
kids. I know how to talk to parents.
Yep.
Baby, just tutor me on some content and then put me in front of the classroom, right? Give me
Right.
the training that I need that's necessary for me to be a formal teacher.
Right.
But I can't afford to go back to school or get whatever XYZ, not on this salary again that the establishment is paying me.
Yeah.
Also, we need to be able to support people to elevate themselves to get up to the next level or to get up to that next pathway.
Yep.
But there has
1000%.
to be an investment. Where
Yeah.
is the investment in our folks? Like, where is that?
And I want to use this moment to shout out Kit Philly, shout outs Isaiah Walker and Kit Philadelphia Preparatory Academy. So he and his leadership team, they actually had a pathway where they renamed their paras to instructional assistants because they wanted to take away the stigma of paraprofessional, right? And so they called them instructional assistants. They built the capacity of those IEAs through consistent reps in front of students. And I want to say 5 of the IEs have now transitioned into full-time lead teaching positions. And so that was one of the first programs where I saw like an intentional method of building the capacity of those educators to get them in front of students as lead teachers. And they also took the lens of like, we want to promote more Black male educators. And like, those were conversations I had with Isaiah and his leadership team, you know, my former supervisor, Joe Ferrara, the academic team at Kit Philly. And so, you know, I saw it I saw it happen. I know it's possible, right? But as a para in a suburban school district, no one ever made it clear, how do I move from that role into a new one, right? Nobody ever laid out a very clear pathway for me. And so when I saw it happening here at Kit Philly, I was like, cool, but like, where's the rest of this work happening? And so, you know, through PEDC and through some of these conversations happening in the city of Philadelphia and across the state, you know, I'm seeing it happen and I'm here for it, man. You know, I'm excited for the outcomes because that could be such a huge fix for the leaky pipeline, as they call it, right?
Yeah.
Is being able to backfill so many of these roles of educators leaving through retirement or whatever it may be with people that are wholly committed to the
They're there.
communities where they serve. We're
They're there.
already there. We're already serving. Like you said, all we need is to learn the art of teaching and then have school leaders encourage our intellectual curiosity, right? And when that happens, man, just move out the way and let them get the job done, right? Just
Let them
step
do
back
their
and just let them
thing.
do the thing. That's it.
Let them do their thing. So how has this been now, moving from teaching, doing talent management, then to like diving right into policy? Like
It's
that's like a new lane.
It's a whole new lane. It's a whole new language. It's been interesting. I'm fortunate to have the support of Sharif and Victoria in the center. So, you know, yourself, so many excellent educators that have been in the work, that have done the work in different capacities. And so they can provide their lens and perspective and additional context that I may not have from a policy lens. I've been really fortunate to connect with folks here in the city of Philadelphia that are already in this work. I keep shouting out PEDC because that's a consortium of a lot of different people in higher ed, on the ground, in policy, right? So that amalgamation of all of these different people doing this work is imperative because it gives the perspective. There's no holes in it, right? Like people are able to fill in all of these different things. And so realistically, I mean, I started September 5th or September 1st. So I've been in this like 6 weeks. I'm swimming through a bunch of data and information. I'm learning the best that I can, but more than anything, I have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. I'm doing a lot of listening, a lot of observing, a lot of understanding, and really taking a chance to synthesize the information that's being provided to me so that I can then allow it to dictate how I move forward. The Center for Black Educator Development has already done so much work around this that I'm just sitting back and like observing how y'all move. And then I'm like, okay, let me get in lockstep with this. And let me make sure that on my end, in regards to the policy work that I've been tasked to do, that I'm really keeping the bar high. And so that's a sort of ambiguous way to say I'm still learning. I'm brand new to policy. You
Yeah.
know, this is not where I came from. I didn't go to school for policy. You know, I've never really enacted in policy in a large measure. But as I learn more, I learn that I'm able to do this work and I'm able to make impacts in ways that I envisioned as a really new rookie teacher. I'm now in a position to do some of those things. And so that excites me. And I'm in a lane that I do know, which is talent management and finding teachers, bringing teachers into this work, getting them excited about the work, but then ultimately creating sustainable cultures for those teachers to stay. And finding real pathways for paras into this work and finding real pathways for teachers into school leadership positions where they can then give back to other folks that look like them, and build and pour into them. And more than anything, man, create just dope opportunities for our kids. That's what I'm here for, is I want to see our kids grow and prosper. And one day somebody's interviewing a kid that, you know, went through something similar as me. He did it and he's giving back now, or she's giving back now. They're giving back now. That's really why I'm here. And that's why I continue to do this.
And I think that what's dope about, again, your background, your experience, you wouldn't be the traditional policy person. You
Nah.
have lived experience to add to what's happening and what's going on in the
Yeah.
education landscape. But it also raises a point for me on how do we engage the Black community in understanding policy and being involved with policy. I think our Black folks miss out on so much
Yeah.
because they don't understand the policy game. They don't understand power dynamics.
Yeah.
So in what ways can we build to really engage our folk in policy?
Well, I think the first thing really comes to mind is undoing a thought process that you have to stay in the field or you have to remain in direct service. Like I said, you know, earlier, I told myself I would never get into policy. And that's because I envisioned it as like selling out. This is not selling out. This is enabling in a way that you probably can't see when you're in that day-to-day service role, right? And so the policies that you enact are able to transform not just your classroom, but hundreds and thousands of classrooms across the state and the country. And so, you know, I really think that is doing away with the mentality, the selling out mentality, doing away with the thought process that, like, if you move away from direct service, that you are no longer serving in your capacity the best way. If you're a person that has the ability to see things in a larger vision, if you're somebody that can really dig into data and synthesize data into actionable steps, if you're somebody that is communicative and personable, you know, and can get out here and get, you know, folks interested in this work, yo, policy is it, man. Get out here and get it done. I think that really starts, and that's specifically to the educators, right? And to the people that are already in the work. Overall, I think that we have to demystify some of this stuff, right? Because, like, I didn't know what policy really meant until I started working in policy, right? And so, you know, and I've been in education, I've been an educator. I didn't know what ed policy was for real. And so, you know, for folks that are not in this work, you know, who are the parents of our students, who are our students, you know, who become parents over time, what are we doing to really get them engaged and invested in the policies that we can, that'll affect positive change for them? You know, what kind of conversations are we having? How are we having more podcasts like this, right? Or are we keeping this steeped in educational and very college heavy vocabulary language that purposefully boxes people out of positions to understand it? Because again, I'm college educated, you know, I'm a relatively smart individual. I didn't know what policy was. I'm looking it up on the internet. I'm applying for the job. I'm like, wait, hold on. I don't even know what it is. So let me get on here and start Googling, and I get inundated with information and data. Nobody really made it simple for me. You know, I had to make it simple for myself. So you have to have the wherewithal to even do that. And so, you know, I think first off, like, folks that are in the work, again, don't tell yourself you can't do something. Believe that you can, understand the impact that it could have. And then secondarily, as we're approaching our families, as we're approaching our communities, and we want them to get behind these policies and understand how these policies can positively affect them, let's have real conversations with them. Let's get their feedback on what do they need, because we give these prescriptive measures, but we never ask our communities what they need, right? You know, so many charter schools were started as like, hey, we're going to figure this out for you. Nah, they good. They good.
Yep.
Not with you. Exactly. Nah, they good. Ask them what they need. Ask the kids what they need. Ask the students what they need. A kindergartner can tell you what they need, right? So a high schooler definitely can. And so, you know, let's really get out here and start asking these questions, and then create policy involved with the people that we claim we're trying to make these changes for, so that they can get behind it and they understand what's actually happening.
And who's accountable for that? So, like, one of the things I think about is, like, are schools accountable for including families and communities in policy decisions? Like, who's accountable for that? So even as you say, like, break it down, like,
Who's doing it?
Yeah, like, who's responsible for that? Is it us as our community ourselves? Like, should we entrust that to community? Is it Black folks who are in education, who have these platforms and have these stages? Is it their job to go into communities and help people understand how to be effective with policy, or to empower them to be a part of the process? Is it the school, right? Schools hold a lot of power when it comes to community, children, and families. So who has the accountability for that?
Ooh, I don't know. Call Sharif. Get Sharif on the hotline. I don't want to answer that. Get Sharif on the hotline. Otis, get them on the hotline, man. Now, all jokes aside, I think it's multifaceted. I don't think any one person or one entity can be responsible. It's layered, right? All of
Right.
this stuff is layered. Our politicians are responsible. If you're running on the platform of education
Education.
equity, but you're not including communities and families in these conversations, you're not serious, right?
Nope.
Our schools are accountable, because you sit either as a oppositional force or as a beacon for success, right? There's really no middle ground. And so our schools are accountable. Our school leaders in those buildings are accountable. Our teachers are accountable. Our communities are accountable, right? Because we know that our schools historically have underserved us and served us up to the prison industrial complex. Yet we haven't really done as much as we probably could to advocate better for ourselves, right? Like, certain in the city of Philadelphia, we all paying taxes, but certain schools perform better than others. Certain schools get more money than others. That still exists, right? And so it's multifaceted, multi-layer. I think that holistically, we all have to take accountability for it. When you know something is wrong, you address it from your lane and you go hard for it. And like you said, it's a never ending thing until it's fixed. And so that's really sort of my answer. It's not really specific, unfortunately, because I don't think that one person can be responsible. I think that you could have one person, like a policy person that oversees the work and make sure that all the different arms of this are actively working in unison, right? Otis gave me this great analogy of an armada, right? Be in your boat, be doing the best work that you can, but make sure that the armada is all headed in the same direction. And when he told me that, I was like, wow, that analogy is so impactful because it's
Mhm.
true. So like we're an armada in a lot of ways. No one person, no one ship is going to be completely responsible for it. But as a collective, we're responsible for moving in the right direction to change these things.
And making sure that we all connected and doing that.
Exactly.
I think that that's another like miss. Some people be moving in the direction, same direction, no connection, right?
Yep.
I think a lot of times I find, especially in this education work, we got silos here, silos there. We're all moving towards the same thing, but there's no conversation and no communication and no
Yep.
connection, which is why I was excited to hear you announce PDEC.
Yep.
We as a center, we are a part of that consortium, but you have people for a long time who were moving in the same direction but had zero connection to
Yeah.
partner, to do work
Yep.
together, to form layers of connections where
Yep.
work could be implemented and people can be supported. And I
Yeah.
agree with you wholeheartedly about schools. You either a beacon of success or you in opposition to the people. And I think one of the biggest things people need to understand, the reason for that is because you are of service. And I think
Exactly.
that sometimes people forget that at the end of the day,
Yeah.
that in these positions we hold, whether you are a politician, whether you are an educator, whether you're somebody in the district, like you are of service.
Yeah.
What other lane or field where you are of service to somebody that people just have to eat the bad service and walk away, right? I'm
Very
in a
few.
restaurant, you serve me
Right.
nasty food, my food is cold. Like, oh, I mean, they tried their best. Let me just eat this.
Right.
I am
Nah.
not. I'm
Nah.
not.
Nah.
Yo, let me talk to you.
Yeah.
And again, I might decide I don't want to send my plate back and bring another one because you might have some special sauce. But at the end of the day, you gonna give me my money back.
Yeah.
You're gonna take something off my bill.
Right.
Like there is some type of exchange
Right.
of services that happen there. But
Yeah.
education is one of those where people are literally of service and just
Not
take what
serving.
they give. Right.
Yeah.
And they get
And
go ahead.
so I was gonna say, you mentioned the silos. So I love when people from for profit come into education and nonprofit because they bring this lens that's very different than what we have here in nonprofit and education. And I've heard numerous times from people that have come from like Fortune 500 companies and are, changing and want to do more and do better and provide more service, that this is the only place that they've seen where people actively work in silos. And I don't know what the root of that is. I think that there definitely needs to be some conversations about that. But like you said, PEDC and some of the other work that's being done is meant to remove those silos. And, why is higher institution, colleges, why are they not working with schools on the ground, right? Why are we not having those conversations? Why are nonprofits that are like the center involved in Black educator development not having conversations with schools and with colleges, right? And so, why is the district of educator, the board of ed, not having conversations with all of the above? Why are district schools not communicating with charter schools? Is because of rivalries and legacy, or are we really in this work to make better outcomes for our kids and for our communities? And so,
And
those silos have to break down for sure.
that's a loaded question though, because it feeds into so much, right?
Yeah.
Like when you say the why,
Yeah.
some of it is in response to the right now.
Right.
Especially even when you think about post COVID. I mean, prior to
Man.
COVID though, pre COVID, but there's so many things that are on fire
Yeah.
right now. So some of it is like I don't have the time, right? So
Right.
the response to the right now, especially at a K-12 level, is just so much going on. The teacher
Yep.
shortages, student behavior, worrying
Yep.
about people being healthy,
Yep.
like all of that. So that's the right now. Also you talking about teachers who are undertrained and not supported, like it
Yep.
is literally the right now. When you get into the collegiate spaces, what we talk about a lot here is just the lack of accountability.
Mm.
I don't have to talk to you. Why am I talking to you?
Right.
If my goal really is to make sure that kids get through this program that we have designed, and it's been the same design for I don't know how
20
many
years.
years,
Yep.
and it's just what it is, and we get our tuition and kids go through and they get the
Yep.
degree, then my job is done.
Yeah.
Where where is the accountability for me to say I need to change the type of educators I'm producing?
Yep.
And I've said this, like, this one of the biggest shams for me is that you have people leaving out of teacher colleges or colleges of educations, schools of educations without certifications.
Oh
Because
yeah.
again, what's the purpose?
Yeah.
Is the purpose just to like go through theory? Or why is it that people don't actually get to practice until senior year? So is the purpose
Yeah.
is to have 3 years of theory, 1 year of practice, and good luck. I hope you pass your certification once you leave here.
Good
Like,
luck.
whereas I feel like if
Congratulations and
people
good
are
luck.
leaving out of schools and not passing certification tests, like that school should be held accountable. Because what did we do
Yeah.
here together for 4 years? Huh?
Right.
Where what's happening with my money? We got to
And
do more to study theory.
and to that theory piece, shout outs to TCNJ because they have a process where their student teachers get placed in 3 different types of schools. So you do a public school placement, you do an urban or a charter school placement, and then you do like a parochial school. And it gives you a lens into what do you enjoy. And I think a lot more of our schools need to place their student teachers in urban schools, if all else, just so that those teachers learn that's not for them, right?
Yeah.
Because the damage that's done when you leave mid-year, when you just break a relationship with kids and parents that have trusted you to lead them at least through a school year, that damage is long standing. And I've been in places where kids, they've had 3 or 4 teachers in the span of a school year, right? And so those kids lose trust, those parents lose trust, and the hardest thing to regain is trust, right? And so I'm all for less theory, more practice. Theory only takes you but so far. And then, you teach them how to teach in school and college. Then they get into the working world. And it's any college program. You learn in college how to do the thing, and then your company organization hires you, and then they teach you how to really do the thing. And so let's spend more time with them actually doing the work. And I love the freedom schools and giving kids at bats and reps, because that's teaching them to do the work. It's taking the theoretical component and giving them the actual experience of teaching. And for some of them, they learn, I don't even want to be a teacher, but I do want to go into finance and work in education, or I want to work for this nonprofit that's in some other realm. I think it's valuable for folks to learn up front whether they do or do not want to do this work before they're being tasked with actually doing the work and they fall out of love with it. Because, to me, there's nothing sadder than a teacher that's burned out. Whether or
Mhm.
not you stayed, you're not bringing your best self. And this is a revolutionary act. This is something that transforms minds. When you're working with minds and the brain, you got to bring it, man. And if you're not here to bring it, step off, or don't step in the first place. But,
Mhm.
I think that we're really doing these college kids a disservice by not giving them the reps and not giving them diverse opportunities to really realize where they want to be in the first place.
Agreed. And then when you think, like you said it right, the power that you have as a teacher, which is what makes it such a revolutionary act. You
Yep.
have the power to change the minds of the next generation, which means
Yeah.
you have the power to change the future.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to bring your whole self to that work, then, like you said, step off. But I think a good point of that is having those at bats and those reps early on to be like,
Yep.
"Ooh, child, this ain't for me."
And there's nothing wrong with that
It's not.
as Black educators, right? And so Reginald Benbow, he had commented earlier, we need to start placing our Black teachers wider across the K through 12. Yeah, all grade levels, exactly. And so that part, but we also have to stop putting our Black educators, specifically our Black men, in the hardest schools to staff, in the toughest schools, in the toughest neighborhoods. And yo, being Black is not a monolith, right? And so I didn't, not me saying specifically, I grew up in West and in South Orange, so I had diverse opportunities. But just because I'm a Black man don't mean I grew up in the hood and I understand the politics of being in the hood, right? And so when you place me in the hood and you expect that I am 100% going to hit the ground running, that's unfair, right?
But
And
Dr.
so,
Carr has said, check the archives of the show. We had a show on Black people not being a
yeah,
monolith. We had brothers come
100%.
on and talking about how, how it taxes you. Just
Yes.
because you Black.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be the all knowing of how to, corral the Black boys, or you're
Yep.
the only Black male in the school, and
Yep.
it's people pulling you right and left. How taxing that is on folks' soul, to have to do
Without a
that kind of
question.
work. So you speaking that, like, but go back in the archives, y'all, check out some of the videos that we've
Yeah.
had on those specific subjects, because you are speaking facts right now.
Yeah.
Black people are not a monolith at
At
all.
all. And I had, teachers sending their kids to my class in the middle of me teaching, and they'd just knock on the door. Kid would open the door like, "Oh, what's up, Mr. Davis? They sent me over here. I was acting up. I got my paper. I'm gonna just sit in the back." And I'm like, all right, cool. Because, we had a relationship. That's my man. I want to see you succeed. So I would rather you come to my classroom and stay out of trouble than get suspended or end up in District 22, whatever it is that they be sending the kids to in Brooklyn. And so, I was cool with that to an extent. But once I realized it was not just my experience, but like I connected with mad Black male educators, and they're like, yeah, they do the same thing to me. I'm like, nah, hold on. Why are we doing the extra work? I'm not getting paid extra for every child that walks into my classroom over my 25, 30 capacity. Now I got 35 kids in my class, right? And on different grade levels, not even in my class, different subject area. I teach ELA. You came from science class, right? And so, that piece, like you said, that invisible tax is very visible to the people that do it every single day. It may not be talked about on a regular basis, but that tax is real, and that tax is mentally exhausting. And we're talking about human beings in regards to kids, but we're also talking about human beings in regards to teachers. And we only have but so much that we can give. Our mental health is so important. We have to, mind your mentals. That's the podcast that Tim and I started. But like, you have to mind your mental health, and it becomes really, really hard where that erosion of work and home happens so much that you 80% work and 20% home. Now you burned out, and you might only be in your second year of teaching. I know first year teachers that are burned out,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what are we doing to alleviate or lift some of that off of them? Or are we okay with that because we know somebody else will come and replace them that next school year?
But guess what? Somebody else is not coming. And I think
Pretty
that's why this
much.
has to be a big focus. They're not
Yeah.
coming.
Yep.
We see, especially in this post-pandemic year,
Oh
they
yeah.
are not coming. You can't
Nah.
even get people to sub right now. They're not coming.
The hardest year of talent that I had was this past year with Kit Philadelphia, and it wasn't why I left. I let that decision was already in the works, but this was the hardest year of staffing I have ever been through. And I talked to other folks in the work because I believe in a coalition of people, and they all said the same thing. It was like, Mal, I've been in this at 2 years to 20 years. I have never in my life experienced what I'm experiencing right now in regards to staffing shortages. And so, yeah, to your point, they're not coming. And so, it's on us to not only identify new places of origin for us to be able to pull talent from and develop talent, but what are we doing to keep people? What are we doing to provide that balance so that people see education as a legitimate pathway? Because if
Facts.
you work in 50 hours a week and you're getting paid 50,000 a year, when you break down that hourly wage, it don't equal minimum wage. So somebody could work at Target realistically and probably have a better work-life balance, right? And so, what are we doing to alleviate some of those concerns and really help people to become the best educator and person that they can be?
Yep. And I'm saying they're not coming right now, but the center's job, we got them coming. But
Yes.
I don't want to build young people up to work in
Yeah.
spaces where they're not going to be poured into,
Nope.
where they feel like they're burnt out. And they're like, Mr.
Right.
Rob, I got these stipends, everything going, but I'm gonna do my little couple years and I'm out because I
Yeah.
this ain't for me. Because I'm
Right.
sending them into places that aren't welcoming to them. I'm sending them into
Yeah.
places that aren't pouring into them. Like
Right.
that all of that is problematic. So And then when I'm talking to folks, I know that y'all have these fires and this immediate, I need somebody right now, but also talk to me about a strategy for a long term.
Yeah.
How do we not continue to have this problem year after year? How do we, in the next 4 or 5 years, you don't even have to worry about a teacher shortage? Why? Because you got 30 to 40 kids from your district who went through a teacher pathway program at your school, and they're ready to
Yeah.
come on back and teach wherever
Yeah.
you need them to teach. But folks have to invest in those kind of strategies in order to be able to resolve the problems that they're having for themselves. They
Yeah.
got to see past today.
Yeah, shout outs to PEDC again, and shout outs to the center, the toolkits that they have on PEDC's website, the toolkit that is on the center's website. Yo, they already laid the foundation for you. They got worksheets that you can do. They got questions you got to ask yourself. They got working groups you could be a part of, right? And so, when we're talking about beyond just today, we're talking that 5 to 10 year plan. The work in a lot of ways has already been done for you. You have to buy in. And I came from the talent space, the HR space. And I can tell you firsthand, the first thing that falls to the wayside when you're trying to fill roles is diversity. You are taking, excuse me, you are taking whatever teacher comes to you, especially when you get to that May through August. That's peak hiring season. You are taking whoever, first come, first serve. We are filling seats, right? And so
Mm.
if you haven't laid an intentional plan for how you're going to identify, right, but also retain the folks that you already have. But when it's peak hiring season and it's every single day, we're doing 6 and 7 phone screens. I got 3 final interviews set up for my principals. And you're looking at the diversity of those numbers, it's skewing one very specific direction, right? When you're like, okay, well, I got to tap into TFA. Well, TFA predominantly has served a certain demographic, right? Yeah, I got to tap into these higher institutions. Well, then these higher institutions, what up, D? These higher institutions are serving a very specific demographic. And so if I'm filling in July, I'm filling with predominantly non-teachers of color because I was not intentional. So these toolkits exist. Tap into the toolkits, use them, be really, really smart and forward thinking about how you approach this. Lay that strong foundation from November through January. And so by February, when you're opening up these conversations, man, you hitting the ground running. You have really strong educators of color already invested in your process. And then don't promise them things that you cannot deliver. If you do not have a culture that is ready for them to come in and thrive, do the work yourself before you start introducing them into that. And that's what you were saying. I hate when I bring somebody into a place and the place isn't ready, right? I take that I carry that in my soul.
Because I done
That's a
recruited you
burden.
here.
That's a
Yes.
burden on my soul.
I asked you
I
to come
put
here.
you
I sent you there.
right. And
Yep.
so I carry that, and that's an albatross on me now. And so, do the work, lay the foundation. The tools are already here for you. Man, get busy. All you got
Yep.
to do is do the work. That's it.
Get invested. Okay.
That's it.
We are wanting to a close, but I would love to
Yeah.
hear from you. What's the number one thing, right? You know how people like leave a legacy. What is like the number one thing that you want to accomplish in this fellowship with the center? Like when you out, you say,
Man.
like, you know what, y'all, I did that. Okay, I didn't do nothing else, but I did that. Okay.
Ooh. Oh my gosh, that is a loaded question. I love loaded questions, and as a podcaster myself, I ask a ton of them. So I guess this is deserved. Um, Man, 2 years is not a very long time, considering people have been at this work for 2 decades. So 2 years is a flash in the pan. But when I walk away from this, what I hope to have accomplished is at the very least have codified the best practices that already exist and be able to hand people a game plan of how, from identifying high school students that are interested or even middle school students that are interested in this work, all the way to how to really build sustainable cultures for your schools to be able to keep the people that you already have and make it really, really engaging for folks that are coming into the work now. If I can hand them a game plan that really lays that out in a comprehensive way, leveraging the information and data that's already existing, I think in 2 years that's something that I can accomplish, and that's work that I'll be super proud of because I know that that's going to last beyond my legacy, beyond my policy position, and that really goes to my legacy of wanting to transform urban education one step at a time, but really from a talent landscape. I know what I'm good at. I'm good at talent management. And so I really want to be able to lean heavily into where are we finding these teachers of the future and how are we retaining the teachers of now? In these 2 years, that is my plan. That's what I was brought here to do. That's what I'm going to fulfill as my obligation to Stonely into the center, right? And when I walk away, with that very tangible product in my final presentation when I'm presenting to whoever shows up to that final presentation, under 2 years from now. I want them to understand, like, yo, that's what Mal did. That's what his legacy will be for these 2 years, and whatever he's walking into next, like you said, he did that. So, that's my goal. And, that goal continues to become more and more clear to me as time goes forward. But, I feel pretty good about the foundations that I have in place already. I feel great about the center. Stonely has been incredible. Shout outs to my cohort who've been dope. Shout outs to DJ Tally, who was in a cohort before me that put me on game with Stonely in the first place. So, I feel supported, man. And I feel like I'm going to be able to not only do what I was brought here to do, but take it beyond that.
Yay. Well, we welcome you. We're excited to have you. And you are dope. You got to tell us eventually what your rap name was so we could look you up in the probably YouTube archives and all that.
Oh man, that's a different.
Hey, we out here. No, but I want to definitely, before we go, I want to put our viewers on to a few things that are happening coming up at the center. So one, if you know a high school student, if you're a high school student watching, please join us on October 25th for our virtual Mbangi. We are going to post the link to register for virtual Mbangi in the chat. And what is virtual Mbangi? Mbangi is a Congolese word that means basically a school without walls. So this will be your opportunity to engage in conversation with other high schoolers from around the nation and about education issues that you're facing. We also use the basis of a book called Lost Education of Horace Tate by Vanessa Siddle Walker to kind of guide our dialogue and pull themes from. So please join us for that discussion. High school students, October 25th at 7 p.m. Link should be in the chat, and you guys will be able to register. The second thing that is coming up is our Black Male Educators Convening.
Let's go.
You are Black male. Please register for our Black Male Educators Convening. We are looking forward. We have some fantastic people that will be joining you to be keynote speakers. We have a few who are already on the show. So shout out to Curtis Valentine. Shout out to Jarvis Givens. Folks like that will be in the mix. And of course, our CEO, Sharif Omeki, will be in the building. And shout out to our co-worker, Amir, who has been doing all the great work to get this done. So please, if you are interested in joining the Black Male Educators Convening, those dates are November 4th and November 5th. Come, please. Many opportunities for you to be a part of the movement. Okay, we need Black teachers and we need them now. But definitely, thank you for coming on today. You will definitely be a future guest with us here at Building the Black Educator Pipeline. And shout out to everybody who supported and participated in our conversation today. We'll see you here again next week. Same place, same time. Peace.
Have a good one.